everyone, I'm Sam.
And I'm Kaitlyn.
And this is Team Get Ovary It.
We're an all-female team participating in the greatest motoring adventure on the planet,
the Mongol Rally.
We'll be driving 10,000 miles across mountains, deserts, and unknown terrain.
And along the way, we hope to spread our feminist and environmental ideals.
Join us here as we share our stories, thoughts, and interviews as we get ready for the Mongol Rally 2021. Hello, everybody.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you for joining us today on a very special episode of the Get Ovary It podcast. We're sitting here with Lianne Bell, the author of How on Earth. In her book, Lianne talks about the realities of living in a consumerist society and how it negatively affects the environment. So she also provides readers with solutions to these problems and easy to follow suggestions on how we can all change our habits to mitigate pollution and climate change. So thanks for being here with us, Lianne.
Oh, thanks for having me. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
Yeah, we're so excited. We're excited to pick your brain because I feel like you, in the book, talk about a lot of really easy suggestions for being eco-friendly. But before we get into that, let's just do a little bit of an introduction. Can you tell the listeners sort of who you are?
Yeah.
I guess, when did you start going green and what was your inspiration for it?
Yeah, sure. So I've been interested in sustainability for probably about 12 years. That was when I first came across the term. And yeah, I don't know the reason. Everyone always asks me the reason, and I think what it boils down to is that it just feels wrong to me for things to go into landfill. So that was always what I was really against, and that kind of led to me being interested in it. And then from that interest, I started studying stuff on my own. And in my book, I talk about my eureka moment, I guess, which was when I, noticed this pile of clothes on my bedroom floor. And so, yeah, that's how I became interested in it.
Perfect. Very good. So second question then. What is your book and why did you decide to write it? So can you just tell us a little bit about your writing process?
Yeah, so my book is called How on Earth Can I Be Eco-Friendly? And I was inspired to write the book after I launched my own ethical women's wear brand. And I launched my brand about 4 years ago, and it was then that I noticed how everybody that was interested in sustainability was all talking about it together. There's Facebook groups and they follow each other on Instagram, and there's a lot of very industry heavy chatter around sustainability. But I noticed that there weren't really many things that were kind of aimed at the wider audience. So I think it's something that, people have different levels of interest in it. It's something I've always been interested in, and that's grown. And I've got friends that aren't really interested in it, but they are a little bit. And I just really felt what are people doing to reach the wider audience? To reach people like my dad who doesn't, care at all, really, bless him. He'll say that he does, but just stuff like that. And there's a lot of people that are busy, there's busy single parents. Is it really up to them when they go after a 12-hour work day and go to the supermarket? Is it really up to them to kind of be thinking about, is their food wrapped in plastic? And just stuff like that. And so I just kind of felt the best thing that I can do to help this movement is by writing something that's easy to read and something that people want to read, and something that reaches a bigger audience. And so that was kind of how I started writing it. And the writing process was hard because I'm super interested in this and I could talk about it and write about it all day. But I was really conscious that I didn't want the information to be overwhelming, because every other book out there is like that. There's all of this information. And I just think people are they're not going to pick up this huge book. It just needed to be something that was, really fun to read. And so getting the editing right was probably the hardest bit, and making it slow and just having it in short, sharp, easy to digest bits. That was probably the hardest bit, like not just kind of like, you know, running away and with it and putting too much information in it. The book set out so that each chapter is under a hashtag. So the idea is that if, you know, people read it and then they like it, then they can research it themselves, because, you know, historically books had to have all of the information because we didn't have the internet. But now we have the internet. Books don't have to be in that format anymore. They don't have to present all of the information. So kind of did it in like a little bit of a reverse way, I guess, in that it, rather than giving all of the information, it just gives a little bit and then kind of says use the internet if you want to research it more, which I don't think anyone else has really done before.
That was actually one of the things I really liked about your book, because it is really accessible to people that are coming in with no knowledge. And so you mentioned that the book is divided into parts, and it starts with the fast fashion section. So one of the quotes that really struck me was when you said, "We wear a garment an average of 4 times before it's replaced," which is crazy when you think about it. So let's talk about, I guess, fast fashion. Like, what is it and how is it bad or dangerous for the environment?
Yeah, so fast fashion was originally coined for Zara. So Zara is a really big European chain store. Do you have Zara in America?
Yeah, we have it.
Oh, really? Okay, I thought it was in Europe.
Yeah, in Korea too, actually. It's quite
popular. It's all over the world now.
For some reason, I didn't think it was in America. Yeah, so the term fast fashion was originally coined for Zara because of the way that they sped up their logistics processes with new technology in like the early 90s. And they were the first company that were able to deliver this, you know, fashion that was a much faster pace. So, you know, that's where the term comes from. And the problem is that over the last 20 years, it's just got faster and faster and faster, to the point now where, like, even from a business point of view, even when you're looking at the logistics of big brands and how they're operating, they can't sustain that, let alone the planet. Like, even from their, like, you know, their cash flow and all of their finances, it's costing them an absolute fortune, and they're making so much stuff and they're not selling it, and then it's all reduced and then it's going into landfill. It's an absolute mess. And so, yeah, that's kind of like, that's the problem, that it's just got faster and faster, and we're asking people to buy more and more, and we're making more and more, and it's just putting so much strain on the resources of the planet, you know, like, not just the resources to make it, it's the fact that so much of it is just going into landfill, and it, you know, it's just such a huge waste. So, yeah, not a big fan of fast fashion.
Yeah, no, definitely not. What can we do as sort of just like a regular consumer to help fight against that?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do, I think, is just to treasure your clothes. You know, like, a lot of people have we've stopped treasuring our clothes, and, you know, that's not our fault. That's it. You know, there's advertising and marketing that's made us that way, and we're not being encouraged to. We're being encouraged to wear our clothes as the least amount of times possible, rather than, you know, back in the day when you had like your dress that was your Sunday best, and you always wore that on a Sunday, and, you know, you had one party dress, and now we don't really do that anymore. And for some reason, there's this like shame shrouded in like wearing our clothes lots of times. I don't know why. Like, I've seen it on my friends' faces before, and they, you know, you can tell that they're like, oh my God, she's wearing that again, type of thing. And like, I don't know, you know, it's, you know, I do know why, but I think it's just really sad that we've come to that. So yeah, the easiest thing that people can do is just stop buying clothes. There's such a huge movement on Instagram, the slow fashion movement, and there's lots of people that are rebelling against fast fashion. You can commit to say, like, I'm not going to buy any new clothes for a month or 3 months or 6 months or a year. Like, I've not bought hardly any clothes for the last 4 years, and a little bit extreme. I mean, it's partly because of where I live. I mean, I just don't like buying new clothes. So my thing was always, for like the last maybe 15 years, I've always bought secondhand. And then when I moved to Taiwan, it wasn't quite as simple. So I have had to buy new clothes to replace stuff because it's just gotten to the point so many times where I've looked in the mirror and I'm like, oh my God, like, look at me. I used to be interested in fashion and I'm just a mess. And like, I've had like an actual breakdown from it. So yeah, I'm going to probably have to spend a lot of money on clothes when I come home because I don't have like hardly anything now. So I don't recommend doing what I've done. I don't even really recommend doing the year thing. Like, I think it just depends how many clothes you've got, I suppose, because I didn't have that many clothes to start with. So I think I really shot myself in the foot. I've got a friend here in Taiwan who, one of her friends, it wasn't even me, it was someone else recommended it to her. She was like, I'm doing 1 year no clothes. And I was like, oh my God, what? And she was like, yeah, she was like, so I've like bought things in preparation to do it. So she bought like underwear and socks and stuff like that. Whereas I didn't do that. So yeah, I think like there is like a lot of movements and stuff that people can get involved in, and it's definitely a growing movement. Like this wasn't a thing like 4 or 5 years ago. So I think it's really awesome.
Yeah, that is really cool. And then so you talked about how your clothes buying habit has changed, but what about your other buying habits? How have they changed since you've become more like ecologically conscious?
Yeah, so it was probably when I started traveling that I got more aware. I was more aware when I lived in London, but I wasn't really making my own like toiletries and stuff. And it was only when I went traveling, and obviously, when you go traveling, the less money you spend, the better, and the less stuff you have, the better. So that was when I kind of was like, oh, okay, like, so I just need this one shampoo bar and I just need this one thing for my face. And then it was always like, oh, well, if I'm like staying somewhere and I've got sugar and honey, then I could make an exfoliator. So I don't need to carry an exfoliator around with me. So that was when my buying habits started to shift, definitely. And yeah, and I also just kind of realized, like, when I'd been living in London, I was like, oh my God, I was wasting so much money on stuff for my face. It's mad. Like one of my friends, she's like, she hates living in the city because she's like, oh, it just makes you spend money, like being in the city. She's like, as soon as you leave the city, you realize that you don't spend any money. Like, there's just something about being in that environment that makes you spend your money, I think. So yeah, once I'd like left London, that was when my buying habits started to change, and just started like making my own toiletries and stuff.
That was probably my favorite section when you were talking about the different things that you could use in your kitchen for base products, because I love doing that. I have very sensitive skin, and so I've often resorted to using natural, like when you were talking about honey and turmeric, those are all things that are just, I mean, they're made in nature, so they are just so gentle and kind on your skin.
Yeah, totally. I think it's like, I don't know, we've got to this point where we're using industrial chemicals on our face, and it's just kind of bizarre because really everything we need is right there in the kitchen. And obviously it's to do with marketing, and companies are like, the way that they're profiting off it. But I just feel like it's got a little bit out of control, like over the last like 20 years. Like, it was when my dad works in the chemical industry, and I used to have acne quite badly, like here when I was younger. And I'd gone to the doctor, and obviously when you're that age, it was just making me really miserable. And I'd gone to the doctor, and he'd recommended a cream, and I got it from the chemist, and it's like benzoyl peroxide. And I'd gone home, and my dad looked at it, and he was like, "What?" He was like, "The doctor gave you this to put on your face," and I was like, "Yeah, it's just like 1%." And my dad was like, "Benzoyl peroxide should not go anywhere near anyone's skin, even if it's just 1%." He was like, that is just insane. And, like my dad is kind of, like, not normally like that. And I was like, oh, like, it kind of shocked me. So I was like, well, if my dad's like that, you know, like there must be a reason. And my dad was like, don't use that on your skin. You know, he was like, I can't believe that. And he was just so shocked about it. And that was when I kind of started looking. Oh, my mum gave me some tea tree oil instead. And I was like, tea tree oil, or it was lavender oil, or maybe, yeah, tea tree or lavender oil. And I was like, that's not going to work.
Don't
like,
worry about it.
Try it. And it did work. It like totally worked. Way better than anything else. And that was when I was just like, well, if lavender oil works so well, like why is the doctor giving me like, you know, benzoyl peroxide? Anything benzoyl, is a carcinogenic. So it's like, why are we putting carcinogenics on our skin? Crazy.
So one of the things that we were talking about just now was all of these new movements on social media for ethical fashion, which is really cool to see. Why do you think this demand for ethical fashion has jumped so much in recent years?
Good question. I think we're just becoming more, I think the world is becoming more aware of just everything in general. And obviously, like a few years ago, it started with food, and, you know, people started questioning where their chicken came from, and then people started eating more plants. And so I feel like the natural progression with that was clothing. And I feel like clothing was a little bit slow off the mark. Like, I did my dissertation on the environmental impacts of fast fashion, and like 10 years ago, and it just, you know, my tutors were just like, this isn't a thing. There was like hardly any journal articles on it. And so it's, you know, it's really nice that over the last 10 years it has grown so much. And I think like one of the other things is that obviously the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, which are kind of like the 17 goals that the whole planet is going to work towards over the next 10 years. And a lot of them are related to consumption and, you know, human rights, eradicating poverty, and obviously stuff to do with the production lines of everything and manufacturing. So I think that's definitely helping as well. A lot of stuff now, like I've been looking at like doing business plans. I've got a couple of business ideas, and every VC that you pitch to, they want everything to kind of work back towards the SDG goals. So that's definitely helping. And I just feel like humans as well, like we've been really disconnected like throughout the 90s. And I mentioned in my book, you know, like for years, huge corporations have hidden behind their logo and behind their brand. And I know like we believed everything that they told us, you know, and the internet is breaking that down. You can't hide anymore. You can't lie. And they're having to kind of be way more transparent. And that's amazing. Like, you know, we don't believe anything anyone tells us really anymore. Like we question everything. And I think that's awesome. Like I know when my nana was alive, bless her, like she'd get like a, you know, like a generic marketing letter, like from the catalogue, like from Littlewoods, and she'd open it and she'd be like, oh, Littlewoods have written me a letter. Oh, they want to give me some money. Oh, it's so nice. And like, and I'd be like, oh my God. And she, you know, like that was like their generation, like the marketing was just like aimed at them, and that was like perfect. Whereas like now, like, can you just imagine anyone like, even like thinking that, you know, we've become way more savvy shoppers than that. So yeah, I just think like the whole like transparency thing is amazing, you know, like now you have companies that have this pie chart that says, okay, we charge you X amount for our products, this much goes to here, this much goes to here, this much goes to here. And that's the way it should be really. Like I made a pretty good analogy, I think, like when I was on the phone to my mum the other day, and I just said like, it's kind of like the way businesses have operated over the last, like, you know, up until now, like historically, is kind of like if you were ordering a pizza with your friends and one friend used their cell phone to order it, and then you were the one that went like downstairs to get it, and then another friend gave you their bank card to pay for it, and so you've all equally contributed, but then you get back upstairs with the pizza and then you eat the majority of it and give them one slice each. That's basically how like businesses have been operating like over the everyone's doing their bit, and then they're just taking, most of the pizza. And I just think it's wrong, really wrong. And I'm really glad that we're seeing that change now. I think it's well overdue.
I totally agree.
Completely agree. I don't know if you guys have seen that Starbucks is now starting to do something similar where all of their coffee is going to have a QR code on it, and you scan it and it'll tell you exactly where the coffee beans came from. Like, it'll pinpoint like the exact farm.
That's so cool.
And then it does the same thing for the farmers. They're going to be able to see where their coffee beans are going to.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's like, it's stuff like that is obviously like to do with technology. So blockchain is going to change everything. And we haven't been able to have that level of transparency before. And I was researching the other day something to do with cotton with the same kind of thing. So I was saying, like, why aren't we able to do that yet with cotton? It's been really slow. And there's like maybe three companies that are doing it. They're like creating the technology and putting the systems in place, but I just think it's been quite slow for whatever reason. Like the textiles industry again is way behind, because we can do the same with fish as well. There's like who is it? Maybe Waitrose. If you buy salmon from there, their salmon has like an RFID tag in it, the salmon is like completely traceable, like right back to when it was the moment that it was caught, came out of the ocean. I think it's Waitrose. It's something, yeah, but the fishing industry is using RFID tags to track fish, and I think it's just amazing, isn't it? It's so cool.
Yeah, it is really amazing. And I think sometimes, me personally, I feel that the internet and social media can be either like a blessing or a curse. But it definitely has kind of opened up dialogues between people and companies. Absolutely. And companies are now hearing more directly from their consumers, and they've been changing their practices as such. Also, it's kind of like opened up this new market for local producers as well, so they can kind of cheaply advertise to people directly, like in their area. So I wanted to ask you, and I think we've seen a lot of this during COVID-19, because now the supply chains are a little bit unreliable, so a lot of people are kind of moving towards buying more local. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the benefits from buying local fashion, in particular fashion, as opposed to clothes manufactured in somewhere such as Asia?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously the carbon footprint is just so much lower, and I think I think it's nice that that you're putting money back into your local economy. I think for a long time we've kind of globalization has meant that everything's been done overseas, but I think definitely local economy, that your economy is always going to need that money. Carbon footprint, obviously, and I think as well, just kind of like reviving industry within your country. Like I know, like when we did start manufacturing overseas, the textiles industry in the UK just completely died, and and it's like all of those jobs were lost, and I just think I feel like we've been sold a bit of a lie with globalization. Like, yes, it's nice that we are able to, trade with one another, but I think in the grand scheme of things, we shouldn't be operating like that. We should essentially be self-sufficient, I think one of the reasons Taiwan has thrived so much during COVID is because everything is manufactured here, and essentially Taiwan kind of put itself off from the world when COVID happened, and nothing changed. All of the masks are made here, all of the food's made here, and Taiwan's been able to just kind of carry on as normal. And I think every country should be like that, really. We shouldn't be so heavily reliant on other countries. We should be able to exist in our own entity, definitely. So I think the fact, if you are buying local fashion, that you're contributing to your home operating like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that actually one of the, I guess you could say, silver linings that we're seeing of COVID is that a lot of people are starting to focus more on local produce, local fashion, support local businesses, which is really cool to see. So in your book, you talked about the different fabrics. Both me and Kaitlyn were absolutely floored when you were talking about polyester. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about this material?
Yeah, so polyester is made from it's made from oil, which is obviously so it's made from plastic, it's made from oil. So you use like 70 million barrels of oil every single year just to make polyester. And so the problem with polyester is that, yeah, it's just, I mean, it's kind of gross because the problem with polyester is that it's shedding all of these tiny microfibers in the washing machines. And we didn't know this until really, really recently. And all of these microfibers have now gone into the ocean and they're being eaten by the fish. So we're then eating the fish and we're eating the microfibers. And, these they're absolutely minute. They're tiny. And it's like, and they're just all over the ocean. And it's kind of, it's insane really. And I think the process, when you think of how we're consuming fashion and the way, like you mentioned, like we're only wearing a garment an average of 4 times before we get rid of it. So if you think that we're like pulling all of this oil out of the ground and then we're using it to make polyester, and then we're making clothes out of that polyester, and then we're only wearing it 4 times. And so the 4 times that we do wear it, it's washed, it releases microfibers, and then we decide that we don't want to wear it anymore. So then it's kind of, then it's done, and then it probably ends up in landfill. So it's like, you've got this whole process of like pulling all of this oil out of the ground just for us to wear it a couple of times and then for it to get buried back in the ground. Like that is a process that will be studied by children in future generations to show how stupid we were. Like they will use that as a prime example as just being like, look how much we've evolved and look how wonderful we are now. And like, kind of like, it's just the most insane process. Like who on earth has been, how have we got to 2020 and no one's kind of said, hang on a minute, like this is not okay. I mean, obviously people have, but I just kind of feel like it should have happened a long time ago, really.
Yeah, no, it really is kind of shocking, like when you hear about these kinds of things and you're just like, how is this a problem? It should have been stopped, like you were saying. Yeah, and speaking of global problems, moving on. So, like you were saying, there's different sections to your books, and I think it's really cool because it covers like a lot of uh, different industries, and then it covers like a lot of different environmental problems, while still remaining concise, like you were saying. So the next question involves actually food. So globally, in your book, it said globally humanity wastes about 1.3 billion tons of food annually. So I wanted to ask you, who are the biggest culprits in this, and what can we do to stop them, or what can we do to reduce food waste in general?
Yeah, the biggest culprit. I mean, I think it's the large corporations. I think the biggest. I think the problem is the system that we have. And again, I feel like technology is going to really help with that system. We've just had this kind of like ridiculous system. So I don't know if you've ever seen Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, he's a famous chef in the UK, and he did a program with Channel 4. And it was about 10 years ago, I think, that he did this program, and it was about supermarkets and how they waste food. And so, like, obviously, a long time ago, before the supermarkets, we had these, local shops, and the shops bought from local suppliers, and then the supermarkets came in, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And this kind of like goes back to what I was saying about how, we need to be, our supply chains need to be smaller and localized. We've had like supermarkets have had this kind of like central hub, and then they've kind of like been sending it out, and it's kind of like, it's just created this really messy web. And they've kind of, and once it gets that big, it's so hard to control the waste, you know, and creating huge volumes of waste. So I think, like, you know, I am very harsh on the supermarkets in my book. Sometimes I do feel bad because, you know, they are just a business, but at the same time, it's kind of like, come on, sort it out. And, you know, I think I couldn't believe that, like, I couldn't believe that it was even a thing. Like, when I was 16, and I think, you know, I mentioned this in my book, when I was 16 and I worked at my local supermarket, and they would just put the food in the bin. So if it didn't sell at, you know, by like the close of day and it had gone past the sell by date, it was just put into the bin. And I was just absolutely gobsmacked. I was gobsmacked that that was even a thing. And I mean, looking back now, like, I wish I'd done something about it, but I think, you know, it was a different time. You know, it was 2002, and, you know, the internet wasn't quite what it is now, but it, you know, it was definitely something that stayed with me. And I just couldn't believe that, you know, even from, you know, obviously it's horrific to the environment, but like, I think the question that I was just asking myself was why? Like, I just didn't understand why businesses would do that, because that, you know, you've spent all that time making something and you've spent all that money making something. Why is a business okay with just wasting that money? Like, why have they not sat down and tried to find a solution and thought, like, oh, well, you know, if it's bread, well, even if it's just like, we'll give it to, you know, send the meat to an animal shelter, or like, you know, send the tin stuff to a homeless shelter. And I think for such a long time, like, people just didn't think like that, especially businesses. And they were just so intent on saving their brand image, right? And they kind of had this perception, like, if we give our stuff away for free, it'll lower the brand image, or maybe even worse, people won't want to buy stuff from us. So they were just so happy putting it in the bin. But it was, it's just, I think it's just such a bizarre concept. Like, I just can't get my head around it at all. Like, there's so much value in waste anyway. And, you know, even if you take away the environmental stuff, it's like, you know, why don't you see the money in that waste? You know, no business can afford to have that level of waste. So, yeah, it's just, oh God, food waste is just a massive thing. I think it's definitely changing. I think supermarkets are, you know, sorting it out. And, you know, I know France have made it illegal to throw away food, like send it to landfill. I don't know what's happening in the UK with it, but, you know, the systems are changing, and that's what the main thing is going to be. Like, the system needs to change.
Yeah, I know Kaitlyn and I were talking on our previous podcast a little bit about, like, comparing how different countries handle waste management, and specifically comparing Korea and the US in terms of food waste. But I think we can look at waste management in general too, because ever since I was growing up, you know, you hear those 3 R's: recycle, reduce, reuse. And so I think we've all sort of grown up with this idea that if we just recycle everything, it's going to be fine and we're saving the planet. But can you talk a little bit to that? Like, is recycling the answer to sort of this huge plastic problem that we're seeing in the world right now?
Yeah, unfortunately not, no. And I think, you know, I was exactly the same as you. You know, we've always been taught, oh, you know, it's recycled, so it's fine. And so, like, when it comes to aluminium and glass, they're infinitely recyclable, so it's not so bad. But plastic is not. And also, plastic is really hard to recycle, same as textiles. And when, even if you do recycle the plastic, it degrades. So it's kind of like you've only got like maybe 2, 3 times, maximum 6 times before it is completely useless, and it, you know, then it is going to landfill, and that's because of the technology that we have. We also don't have the infrastructure to recycle the amount of plastic that we're producing. So, you know, in the UK, like, everyone's kind of like got on board a little bit because 2 years ago, China said, that they weren't going to take our plastic anymore. And, it's just one of those things as well. When I read that, I was like, why has nobody why has nobody in the government said years ago, like, oh, hang on, instead of us shipping our plastic overseas, maybe we should stop using so much plastic? It's like, and you kind of like read something, you're like, who the hell is in charge here? They're doing a dreadful job. Like, how has it got to this point anyway? So, yeah, recycling with plastic is a really big thing, and it's not the way. And so we've got the consumption is a problem. But I was actually reading the other day, because in nature, nature produces way more than we ever do or ever could. And I find it really fascinating that even, nature produces so much stuff. Like there's, tons of stuff being produced by nature. But it's not a problem. Like we're not like having like a crisis meeting about leaves being piled up in the street, because they just go back into the earth, And so that's kind of like what we need to look at with plastic now, is we need to look at producing plastic with something that mimics nature. So, there's lots of stuff in nature. So there's loads of projects that are looking at, what is it called? I can't remember the name. It's like it's the stuff that's in the shell of like prawns and shrimps, and you can mimic it to be like plastic. So, in the future, we're going to end up to the point where we have like, all of our plastic stuff is actually, it'll just biodegrade. And that's what we want, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like I've heard, and maybe you can actually speak to this, because it's something I've been wanting to research. I've heard a lot of mixed reviews about bioplastics, because I've heard that some of them can't really be, I guess, biodegraded unless they're in specific conditions.
Yeah, so the problem at the moment is that some bioplastics need to be composted industrially. So, and obviously we don't have that much that many industrial composts, and we also, if you don't have a system in place to make sure that plastic thing reaches that industrial compost, then obviously it's just pointless. So yeah, at the moment there's a lot of hype around companies saying like, oh, we've got a plastic bag, your clothes come in a plastic bag, but it's a bioplastic, so it's fine. And then it's like, yeah, but it's a bioplastic that, it can't biodegrade at home. So yeah, definitely one thing we need to be looking at is, creating things that can compost at home. So like one of my favorite things at the moment, there's a company called Volvac, and they've got a t-shirt, and it's made from plants and algae, and it composts at home. The t-shirt will compost at home, and it's so cool. So like it is coming, it's just taking time, but it's definitely like, stuff like that is on the horizon. And it's, at the moment their t-shirt is, I think it's about £110, which, I actually don't even think it's that bad. And then when you're done with the t-shirt, you can just bury it in the compost. So if they're doing that now, like for sure, in the next 10 years, it's going to be way more common. And, we'll just be able to bury our clothes in the garden. They say that with their t-shirt, you can literally just bury it in the garden.
Recently, we did an episode about Cool Earth and the destruction of the Amazon rainforest. And, cattle ranchers were one of the main causes of that deforestation. So you talked about your dad earlier, right? And I think in your book you mentioned about like, you're trying to change your dad's diet for his health, but also for the environment too. So what I wanted to ask you, what are the environmental and even the health benefits of reducing red meat consumption?
Yeah. So I always say to my friends, like, I don't eat red meat, and I don't eat beef, and I don't eat pork. And my friends always find it funny, because they're like, oh, so you're not a vegetarian, you're not a vegan, because I don't eat dairy either. And then I'm just like, they find it funny because I don't tell people to stop eating meat. I just tell people to eat less meat. And I just feel like it's just, I hope that they don't eat meat, and I hope one day that I don't eat meat. But I just feel at the moment it's just a lot nicer to say to people, let's just try and eat less meat. And it's kind of the theory that I've had with my dad as well. And the reason behind it is because we now have 7.5 billion people on the planet. And so when you think of those 7.5 billion people all eating animals and the resources to sustain those animals, so to give animals water, to feed them, we just don't have enough resources on the planet for everybody to be eating animals. So that's why I'm, very much, in favor of everybody just eating less meat. And that was kind of, how I got started with my dad as well, just kind of slyly giving him vegetarian food and stuff. So, I think if everybody, I think a lot of people kind of think I know some people can get very funny about the bloody vegans, telling me what I can and can't eat type of thing. And I just think a lot of people don't realize it's not, I don't care what you eat. I don't care if you like eating steak. If you like eating steak, whatever, enjoy your life. But, at the same time, I think if people understand, it's not just about that. It's about the fact that, if you really do like eating steak, then maybe eat it less, or else, one day you might not be able to eat it at all. And so, and obviously then when you factor in the deforestation of the Amazon is because, we're demanding more and more meat, and the cattle ranchers, they obviously want to, supply and demand. They want to meet that demand. They want to make money. And then, then when they're just savaging the rainforest, and it's just this horrific cycle. So, I think it's important that we all kind of realize the reason behind it, definitely.
Well, that actually is about it for time, but we just wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your nuggets of wisdom with us, and then also for our listeners. For our listeners, where can they find you? Where can they find your book? Where can they learn more about the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so my book is on Amazon. It's called How on Earth Can I Be Eco-Friendly? And I'm on Instagram at Lianne_Bell. Lianne is spelled a little bit weird. It's LIANNE_Bell. And my website is the same, liannebell.com. And if anybody wants to follow me on Instagram, that would be awesome. I'm always posting on there. Little nuggets of wisdom, like you said, and bits of information.
Again, thank you so much for being with us here today. We really recommend reading How on Earth Can I Be Eco-Friendly if you're interested in making earth-positive changes in your life. The book is fun, quick to read, and Lianne suggests all very doable lifestyle changes that can nevertheless make a big impact.
Definitely. I try to have as small of a footprint as I can, but after reading her book, I feel inspired to try even harder.
Same here.
Okay, goodbye for now.
See ya!
That's it for today, folks.
Thanks so much for tuning in.
And as always, please support this work by subscribing and donating to our cause at www.teamgetoveryit.com.
Donors get access to specific content like stickers, t-shirts, and postcards from our journey.
You can donate for as little as $5 and the benefits build from there.
Go to our website for more information.
Or find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Team Get Over It.
Thanks for listening.
And catch us next time on Get Over It.